Okay, so once we know there's some different syntax, we have to understand and know how to use them. So first is visibility. So visibility is basically is access modifier, okay, which we learn in the CS 160. Okay, based on different access modifier, we can define who can access your class. Okay, so in the Java, we have different type of access modifier, right? For example, public, private, protected. Okay, so as we know, the public is access modifier allow every all the members to access those members, right? So which means um, the same class and the other class can access the public members. Okay, but for the private, the only itself, okay, the all objects in the same class they can access the members. But for the protected, only allow you to access in the same class and the subclass. Okay, that's what it is subclass. Subclass means if you do inheritance, okay? So if you do inheritance, only subclass. So this is the super, right? The super class. This is subclass, okay? Because subclass will inherit from the superclass, right? So all the members from subclass can access the protected members from superclass, okay? Next one, okay, the slash. The slash is means this value is derived from other attributes. Okay, for example, the age. You don't have to ask a user, ask a developer to define the age because those attributes can be calculated from the date of birth, right? So, which means you don't have to specifically create attributes which allow ask user to input to set to get, right? So we use the slash to help you to help developer to identify so which one is a derived attribute. Okay, then we need a name of attributes. Okay, name of attributes basically is property name, right? Or instance variable name. So first of all, you have to follow some standard or best practice. As we know, all in the Java, all the members, okay, all the members, including properties, including operations, method, all of them, okay, the first letter is capitalized. Okay, you can tell over here the first name, last name, DOB, address, SS number, age, password, person's number. The first letter is what? Is lowercase, right? So, which means only the class name or constructor name, they have to be capital. The first letter have to be capitalized. Okay, it is not like you it's right or incorrect. Okay, it's a good habit. We need to define we need to define something. Okay, um, consistently. Okay, if you program in Java or a class, you can tell first the letter is capitalized. We can identify them as um, class, right? So for example, when I write the string, okay, it's easy. We can tell the string is class, right? Because first the letter is capitalized. Okay, for the other thing, you can tell like int, right? Like long, we can tell this primitive data type, right? So this is not class because first letter is lowercase. Okay, so you need to be able to give some standard. Okay, as I know in some of other program, we give the some good practice like using lower um, underscore as first, they give first the name. Okay, so it depends. Okay, but in the Java, the best practice, so or most member, the first letter is lowercase. Okay, except the class name and the constructor name. Okay, so once we know we gave a good name, how to give a good name is also the same another story, right? We need to make sure the attributes is easy to understand. People can easily to identify. Okay, this is for the first name. If you give a name like name one, name two, so basically give people another thought, right? Maybe this for people's nickname, real name, maiden name. So confuse people, right? So a good attribute name is very important, especially the meaningful name. Okay, especially on the other hand, you have to follow the name rules. Okay, as we know, we cannot use reserved word, right? We cannot use numbers at the start, right? All those things you have to consider to define, to write your class diagram. Okay, once we know that, you need to be sure what kind of data type to be defined, to define the attributes. Okay, so there's two type of things we can define. Okay, first is using the user defined class. What is user defined class? Basically, you try to create your own class, and you try to define instance variable using that to define the class. For example, you define the class for people, right? For people, okay, you can define in the code, you can have 1p, right? So this is the one you defined using your customized data type, okay? Um, beside that, we can use primitive data type. As we know, the primitive data type, you can use the int, float, char, boolean, uh, float, struct, long, double, uh, something like that, right? Byte. So another thing you can use is enumeration. Okay, enumeration is a kind of different when we try to define the class diagram. Okay, we're using this one to help other people to understand. Okay, this is enumeration data type we try to create using the class diagram. Once we know that, we need to know the multiplicity. Okay, multiplicity is the attributes help you to understand like how many attributes we can have. Especially, we can use them into the list. Okay, for example, in this person's class diagram, we have this multiplicity. Okay, it's one too many, which means the address you can have as listed, you need to have one address or many. Okay, so the notations means minimum and the maximum. So as default, if we didn't say, okay, the attributes as you, the value is one. Okay, so for one people, you can have one first name, one last name, one date of birth, right? um for the age, only one. For the password, only one. For the personal number, is only one. If you try to customize this multiplicity, you can give those things over here like a minimum and a maximum. Okay, using the minimum and the maximum to help you to for the developer to identify, okay, this is the requirement the we come from customer, because the person may have multiple address. For example, they have PO box address, they have working address, they have home address, right? So it depends on your requirements. Based on requirements, we need completely to improve those multiplicity in order to satisfy the requirement of the user. Then we need a default value. What that means? Okay, so if we create an object of the user, okay, sometimes people probably they want the default one. For example, we try to create an account for new employee. So the standard way we create the username and password for new employee, we just give the default value, right? The default username. Okay, so this is same thing. We try to give the default password to the still to this person. So every new objects of a person, they got the password is PW123. Okay, so this is a way we try to give the default value, make it easy for developer to create the object of the class. Okay, then we go with the operation. Okay, so operation, the most part is very similar um, to the attributes we just defined, right? We get a name. You have to follow name rules. You have to be import. You have to be a meaningful name, right? The get name, update last name, get property numbers. Those things is easy to understand and highly relate to this class person, right? So then you need a defined return type of the method. Okay, that means if you try to use the method, you need to give the people to understand, okay, if I use this method, what's the return type? Okay, what's the data type of the value you just return? Okay, so obviously you can tell get name, okay, get name is return nothing, and update last name will return true or false. Get person's number, that will return a number integer. Okay, the second thing we probably you need to understand what is out mean. What is out mean? Okay, out, in. Okay, okay. So if some of you understand, especially you learn the C sharp in last semester, we talk about um, this word in our C sharp, but in here we don't have to you understand this part, okay? But you should understand. You if you are interested, you can go to the C sharp. You can just check what it mean out int in here. Okay, so I just leave here. um I just mentioned this part to you in case you interested. Okay, so after that you need to know what is a class variable and what is a class operation. Okay, as we know, instance variable or instance attribute or global in the variables, they all stand for the same thing, which is instance variable. So instance variable or attribute defined, this is the level, the most high level of the class. Okay, is defined all the attributes of this class. All right. So another is class variable. So we can talk about this as class attributes or static attributes. It's only defined once, and shared by all instance variables. So you can consider something about the constant. Okay, what is constant? As we say, we're using a final to do the constant number. The constant number is means never changed in the future. For example, if you define the pi in your class, so basically pi, the number pi is constant variable, right? Because this pi never change, or something like a currency rate. Okay, if you want to exchange a currency rate or some other rates, most of the time it won't change very bigly. Okay, so that's the thing we say this is class variable. Another one is class operation. So we can you can think this is a static operation. The static operation, most common and the familiar class we use is mass. Okay, so in the mass class, all the members is static. Okay, which means all the method or variable belong to the class mass, not to the object. So this is the way we say, okay, this is a class operation. Okay, the big reason is, you know, if you take the example, mass class example as example, you can tell is a mass class, okay, or like a return max value, right? The, or minimal value, it won't change. This method won't change because based on the object of a method, right? It only belongs to the mass class, which means we using mass dot max method to return the value we want. You don't have to create the object. Okay, for example, object of the mass, right? You don't have to because even we try in this way, a dot max or mass dot max. What's the difference? There's no difference because this max value won't change because of the object, right? So that means we can use the static method, only use class method to call the static method, right? It give us, okay, save one line. Okay, so this line is not necessary. We're just using the class dot max method is to return something we need. Okay, so this is very important. So you need to know when you create a class diagram what kind of thing is instance variable and what kind of the variable is a class variable, what is a mass class operation as well. Okay, so after that you should be able to, okay, to easy to translate a class diagram to the real class. Okay, because you can tell based on this diagram you can just easily to translate into the class. In this way it's easy, you can to organize them, to give your outline, to create the code. Okay, except you just write down your code from scratch using your thought. That's not very professional. It's not very efficient, especially when we code a big, large project. Okay, so there are different levels of detail when we create a class diagram. Okay, so it depends on your specification requirement. Okay, in some big picture, we only use the class name. Okay, to do this, to give a big picture. For example, maybe this one linked to that one is big picture. Okay, but most of the time we're using this one. It tell us like how many, what's the members of the class. Okay, so later on, this is the more detailed class diagram to help you to understand, okay, what kind of a method access modifier was a return type, it's more detail, give more informations to help you to identify maybe the problem with this class, what's the relationship between the different classes.